What legislation's on the table for coronavirus response, and how are the presidential campaigns responding?
To explore all of this and so much more, The Hill's editor-in-chief, Bob Cusack, joins us with the debrief. Great to have you, Bob.
Good to see you,
Thanks
Bob.
for being here.
Yes, weird day.
All right, just give us an update on where we stand in terms of initial legislation to help deal with coronavirus response.
Well, initially, the House was going to really do what it normally does and kind of ram a bill through the House and stick the Senate. But then there were some talks between the Secretary of the Treasury, Steve Mnuchin, and Nancy Pelosi that went fairly late last night.
Yeah, they talked like 7 times yesterday.
Yes.
Right?
Now, Senate Republicans did not like the House bill. So what
did they not like about it? What was the sticking point?
There were too many goodies, as President Trump said. He said, well, there were too many permanent fixes.
Okay.
At the same time, I think in this situation, just like we had, after 9/11, certainly after 2008 financial implosion, there's got to be a bipartisan, get in a room, decide, and then vote. So they don't have a deal, but they're very close to a deal. And Pelosi last night was saying they expect to vote on a bill today. I think they've got to make a law today or this weekend.
Right.
And it's got to be big. And I think you've got to load it up because I got people on Wall Street and they're like, listen, this can't be a modest bill.
Right.
This is a big bill. I think, and how do you get bipartisanship? You get your stuff, you put it in a bill.
Yeah.
It's expensive, but you have to respond.
Well, I mean, the real question is how expensive is it going to be? And also, just a procedural note, Bob, isn't the Senate adjourned until Monday? So how are they? Are the senators here? Are they able to gavel it in?
It would pass the House and potentially have to pass the Senate as early as Monday if they come back on Monday. But you're right, they're gone. So this is not going to be made into law. But if we get the sign that a big bipartisan vote in the House, and Mnuchin's on board, Trump's on board, McConnell's on board, it'll pass. It'll pass.
So what are we talking about specifically here? Because the potential details I've seen have been fairly small ball. I mean, it doesn't look to me like they're talking about any major response.
No, it does look like there's phases here where this would be the first phase where they would do emergency stuff that has to be done. But there's going to be no payroll tax, I think.
We're talking about like paid sick leave.
Payroll is not even being included in phase 1.
No, I don't think so. No, but they were not revealing any of the details last night.
Right.
So, but Pelosi was saying this is going to be multi-pronged, so that could ease the market somewhat. But we haven't seen the details of any bipartisan bill. We've only seen what Senate Republicans said was a non-starter.
The issue, Bob, is, as I understand it, is because the economy is basically, these markets are just cratering so fast. Is that going to be enough in order to quell because Trump previewed the payroll tax and the copay and all of that, and the market still cratered by 1,000 points.
And they injected $500 billion in.
Well, it was like short-term loans in order to some of for liquidity into the banking system. But that is still not doing the trick. So is this going to do it?
I don't think this bill today is going to do it. But I also think, number one, the biggest overriding issue still remains. Remember, Mike Pence said that last week there would be 4 million people tested, with kits.
Right.
We have basically, it's been 12,000 people in this country. Right. We have no idea what the testing is. So now Fauci this morning was saying, okay, over the next couple of weeks, because the private sector is getting involved, we're going to have a lot more tests. I think it's more the uncertainty than anything Congress can do it.
And so another thing you were talking about is this emergency declaration. Why is the president, they haven't declared it a state of emergency. Yeah. As I understand it, it's not necessarily to be like, there's an emergency. It's because it frees up a lot of funds for the president. So are they weighing it? Or are they considering
They're weighing it, but it's also, remember, President Trump from the get-go has said this is not a major issue, he's downplayed it, and that would go counter that. So the president has indicated we're thinking about it. This has been done before, but it would give the president massive powers. It depends on how he wants to use it. He have to specify. Congress can overturn that within 30 days. That is rarely happening. You could actually shut down the internet if you wanted to with that kind of power.
But I know on healthcare spending in particular, you can unlock like billions in CMS funding just from unlocking.
I tell you one thing.
Seems like something we might want right now.
The markets would like that.
Yeah.
Like that. Of course. What do we know about his sort of private view of what's going on versus the public persona?
Well, this is not the best crisis for President Trump. He's dealt with conflict with North Korea, and Iran. But this requires patience, and this requires some, really setting expectations. And the president, honestly, is not very good at that, because he has tried to say this is not a problem. It's a problem. I mean, I think it's really over the last 24 to 48 hours really hit people. With Tom Hanks getting it, with a lot of other people getting it.
March Madness is
all
canceled.
the March Madness being canceled. We have never seen anything. Yes, it's unbelievable.
And I think that's the type of people see that and go, oh wow, I mean this is a real problem. And the other issue is the exponentiality of it. Is that you have 10 cases one day, you have 1,000 in a week.
Yes,
and that is really what's happening.
It's hard for people to wrap their minds around.
It's very difficult to comprehend.
Exponential growth.
Right. I mean, yesterday, Bob, we're going to talk about this later with the Ohio chief, but I mean, the public health expert there said that 1% of their population is infected. That's 100,000 people.
Yes. Yeah. And they've shut down all the schools statewide in Ohio, even though they have, I heard this morning, around only 5 confirmed cases. So they are suspecting a lot of cases. And that's why Anthony Fauci, who is really respected, and I think he has been a very good point person. He's been out there. He's been communicating.
People trust him.
They trust him. He's dealt with all these kind of stuff and HIV over the years. He has said, and he's good at expectations, this is going to get worse because we're going to get more tests and we're going to find out a lot of people have this.
I think that's right.
Bob, Ohio's supposed to have a primary on Tuesday.
Right.
Those are questions we're asking. Like, what are you going to stand in line, and how are you going to deal with this? And, obviously you could do absentee, but there hasn't been any kind of guidance that I've seen of maybe you should do that right now. This is a problem going forward, certainly in the short term, and we don't know how long it's going to last.
No, and we see that in the Democratic debate. It was moved here to Washington, D.C. On Sunday, there's going to be no live audience. And I mean, I imagine we were talking about this. The tenor of the debate itself is going to fundamentally change.
Yes.
Right? It's going to be all about how can you handle this crisis going on right now. It's a lot like 2008, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah. And what's your plan? I mean, this is a test of president. So if you're running for president, you've got to have a plan. I think that Bernie Sanders might lean into Medicare for all and say, listen, if we had Medicare for all, we wouldn't be having some of these problems, that everything would be paid for. We've had to actually stipulate that if you get tested, and that's where the administration, one of their many fumbles, has said they didn't guarantee, are you going to get the vaccine? Are you going to have to pay for it?
Right.
Congress is going to pick up those type of tabs.
But just say it from the beginning.
Yeah, exactly. Say it and then figure out the legislative maneuver. I mean, honestly.
To ease the panic. Because in emergencies, Congress does pick up the tab.
Yeah,
right.
They should.
Exactly
That's the
right.
job.
Yes,
but if we remember back to 2008, I mean, the financial collapse was actually one of the moments when President Obama, then candidate Obama, was able to sort of separate himself. McCain looked freaked out. He suspended his campaign. It was a whole thing. And President Obama looked cool and calm and collected under the circumstances, which I think was a major test for him, especially being a relative newcomer in D.C.
Yes.
What do you think people will be looking for out of these two candidates, and what do you make of their relative responses yesterday?
Well, as we all know, Biden now is the front runner, and he gave, I think, a pretty sharp speech. Not all of his speeches recently have been sharp. His debate performances have been uneven at best.
Yeah.
But I think he did come across as presidential. That's what people are looking for.
Yep.
And, listen, 6 weeks ago, Trump was a pretty good bet for re-election.
Yeah.
And now he's on shaky ground. The good news for Trump is that he's got a lot of time. He's got about 8 months to turn this around. He's got to turn around because the last couple of weeks have really been a disaster.
It's interesting because his campaign now hinges not on his ability to campaign, but in order to manage this crisis. It will. Yes. I honestly think it will be a up or down referendum on his managing of this right now.
Yes, absolutely. Now, it is a long way away. Maybe in May or June it subsides, but then there's always going to be the danger also
fallout.
And that's when do we return to normal life? Like there's going to be some concern. When should the sports teams go back? Because this thing could be returning. This could have ramifications on how we communicate, how, whether it's handshakes, for quite some time.
For a while.
That's right. And not to mention the economic fallout and how long it takes to recover from that.
You're not going to be able to get away from that because this is going to have a backlash of, even if it goes away, of this pause where very few people are working. I
covered in my radar today, JP Morgan estimates a 3.2% drop in GDP, a contraction for the second quarter of 2020. So that's not great.
It's massive.
That's not good.
Thank you, Bob.
Appreciate it.
Next on Rising, friend of the show, Hill reporter Julia Manchester. She had to self-quarantine. She's going to share her experience. That's next.